What's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here then welcome to our little corner of the internet. Today we're going to be watching a video titled How I See the US After Living in Europe for 2 years. I feel like this is going to be very interesting since I've never been to the US and I've lived in Europe my whole life. I'm excited to see his point of view, so let's see what this video is about.
Almost 2 years ago, I took one of the biggest risks of my entire life. I sold everything I owned, told my family and friends goodbye, and started a new chapter in Europe.
I literally got chills, I don't know why.
Portugal, to be exact.
Oh, Portugal is pretty near.
Damn it! This is how I see the US after living in Europe for almost 2 years. And let's just say it changed me, but not in the way I thought it would. I'm going to be brutally honest and not going to hold back. Keep in mind, these are only my opinions and you can take it or leave it, simple as that. Ever since the first time I had visited Europe back in 2011, I knew that I wanted to move here at some point, gain some new perspective and introduce a new culture into my life. And what better place to do it than Europe? Instead of 50 states, there's 50 different countries that speak completely different languages and all have diverse food and cultural backgrounds. So I'm going to start with the biggest difference that I found between United States and Europe, and that is the work-life balance.
Well, first, I mean, the United States is a country and Europe is a continent. So, I mean, it's nearly, well, how would you say? It's kind of like hard to compare a whole, 50 different countries with one. Does that make sense?
Difference that I found between United States and Europe, and that is the work-life balance. Now, this is a big generalization because I know that there's countries in the European Union that work very hard and want.
Right, that's exactly what I mean. Like every country in Europe is completely different. It's not like the States, it's different countries, like completely different countries. So it's like, if it depends if what country you're comparing it to.
Because I know that there's countries in the European Union that work very hard and want everything to be perfect. Germany. But for the most part, it seems that one of the most important things to Europeans is their quality of life. There is this generalization that a lot of Europeans don't work as hard as Americans, and I don't think that's completely true. Many cafes and restaurants in Europe have the same owner from the start to finish. They never retire, they do the same thing with very exceptional quality until the day they die. And this isn't something that happens too often in the United States. This is one of the reasons that I think in Europe, the food quality generally tends to be a bit better, even the fast food. The European fast food tends to still have fresh ingredients if they aren't the franchises from America like McDonald's. You can't compete with a restaurant whose owner has been cooking the same dishes for 50 plus years. And it's pretty obvious when I speak to friends and family back in the United States that they kind of have this rushed agenda where they're trying to get as much done as they can throughout the day. And this was me included when I lived in the United States and I was working 12-hour days, sometimes 6 days a week. But I was missing out on some of the most important things like stopping and really
12-hour days, 6 days a week. There's a lot of people I know here too that work 12-hour days, like from 6 to 6 or 8 to 8. But I feel like this, yeah, it depends kind of on the country. I think Spain, Portugal, all these kind of like countries in more of like the what is it called? Wait. Sur area, like down, more warmer countries have more like a laid back feel, and then the northern countries like Norway, Finland, Germany, Sweden, all of the above, like the northern countries are more like they have more work ethic or more kind of like work driven, if that makes sense.
Listening to my friends and family. And I think that this is one of the most important things to most Europeans. I think this idea in the United States of having these big achievements and never being forgotten is something that's really important. However, in Europe, they have the right to be forgotten. There is actually a law in Europe that is the right to be forgotten. Now, this is a foreign concept that I don't think Americans think about a lot. In Europe, if you've had an imperfect past, the European Union allows you to move past that. And this also means that in Europe, people have the right to have their personal data erased. Once the personal data is no longer necessary to the organization collecting it. While in the US, forcing removal of articles on the internet is impermissible under the First Amendment. Now, after
So Europeans can't get cancelled because if they get cancelled, they're just like, delete that, that didn't happen.
living in Europe for almost 2 years, I have come to the conclusion that the United States is currently in a state of toxic extremism. It's not very common in Europe to hear people arguing about politics, blaming unrelated issues on opposing political parties or specific politicians. It's just something you don't really hear that often. Now, that doesn't mean that Europeans aren't political. However, you don't see it tearing apart families based on the president or prime minister that they voted for. When I go to family gatherings in Portugal, rarely does politics ever come up. And this is something very polarizing and disappointing in the United States. I can't go anywhere in the United States without somebody blaming something on Biden or Trump, like they're responsible for everything that's gone wrong in the past 10 years or something. Now, sure, I have my political beliefs as well, but I usually keep them to myself and don't ruin everybody around them's energy and vibe. Now, in Europe, they have witnessed all of the extreme political swings, and they are living in a direct result of the aftermath, which is why they are a little bit more hesitant and seasoned when it comes to political matters. If you come from a place in the United States like Detroit or Flint, Michigan, like I do, then safety is a night and day difference here in Europe. Especially Portugal, which has been ranked one of the top 10 safest countries in the world. After living in Europe for 2 years, I've been able to let my guard down and not be as paranoid. Especially when I'm walking around.
What? Okay, if this is safer than there, I'm already paranoid here. Okay, I may be living in not so good neighborhoods, but still. Safe? Let your guard down? Like I'm
around alleyways at night or going to see.
It does depend though. Some places are very, 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 very peaceful. Like Portugal, some towns are super peaceful for sure. Finland is pretty peaceful, you know. It's safe, but it's like America, you know. It depends on where you are, definitely.
A movie or going to a festival, I don't have to worry about the place being shot up. It's very sad, but this is a true reality in the United States. And in the USA...
Oh, okay, I didn't think about it like that. Yeah, that is not one of our concerns, really. It still could be, you know. You never know. But I guess differently. I've never thought about it since I've never been to America, you know.
Wealthy people have moved to the suburbs in gated communities because they fear the inner city's rising crime rates. And I can't help but to think back in times when I lived in Los Angeles where I was robbed at gunpoint, or when I lived in Reno, Nevada and our family house was broken into multiple times. And sometimes it makes me apprehensive to come back to visit the United States. And if you've ever had a gun held to your chest, I'm sure you can sympathize with what I'm talking about. But after being in Europe for a couple years, there are few places that have violent crimes like the United States. Europe is certainly not a perfect place, and you do have crimes happening here. However, nowhere near the scale of the violent and gun crimes happening in the United States. A place where you can be attacked in the streets for your beliefs. And that concept to most Europeans is completely foreign. Now, I know that prejudice exists here in Europe. However, I have never heard an ethnic or racial slur ever yelled on the streets like I have in the United States. And that should say a lot.
I don't know where in Europe he is.
All right, now let's talk about the food. Unless you have the financial means to do so, you are likely paying 4 times for gourmet foods in the United States, where in Europe, these foods are just the normal. In America, fresh, healthy food is usually sold at a premium where only the richer people can afford it. In my opinion, this is a crime against humanity. Here in Europe, they subsidize the agriculture so that it can still be sold at an affordable price. And more than half.
I mean, yes, there's like fruit stores everywhere, and fruits and vegetables are very easy to buy, but it also depends because in Finland, for example, they're more expensive since Finland can't really grow their own like oranges and, you know, pineapples, but in Spain it's cheaper, so it kind of depends. And I think in America isn't it pretty much the same? I mean, I don't know. And also America has like just way more food options in general and bigger grocery stores and more of everything. So I don't know, I just think it kind of balances out.
Half of the GMOs and chemicals available in United States foods are illegal in Europe.
That's true.
Typically in Europe, teenagers speak multiple different languages. They're well versed in fine arts and music. And they understand world geography. Generally just much more.
I understand world geography, definitely. I didn't even know. No, it depends on the person.
Music. And they understand world geography. Generally just much more cultured than what I see typically in the United States. I mean, when I first came to Europe when I was 21-year-olds, I had 17-year-olds playing me Mozart and Bach and painting incredible paintings.
What? I was definitely not playing Mozart and Bach at 17 years old. But good for them. Again, I feel like this is something that just depends on the person, but
and speaking 4 different languages to me, and I realized that, wow, I am not cultured at all. And I think a big part of this is attributed to the education. All over Europe, schooling is free. And some of the best universities are even free. Students here can focus on their passions, and if they don't like what they're gotten into, they can switch it without being in this massive mountain of debt like in the United States. Students in Europe can focus on their passions, and if they made the wrong decision and don't like the career path they're taking, they're not in mountains of debt like they are in the United States. They don't have this strong pressure to continue to pursue something they don't want to do. And I think this is really important. Some countries in Europe even allow you to go into a specific trade of choice to be able to follow your passion and not have to learn all of this useless knowledge that has nothing to do with your career path. I know many people, including myself, that are afraid to go to the doctor in the United States because of how much it's going to cost. And it's a complete opposite contrast here in Europe, where many of my friends go to the doctor regularly just to get a checkup because they can. And it seems to be encouraged by the doctors. In Europe, things like blood tests and exams are a fraction of the cost that they are in the United States. For instance, I went to the hospital and needed to have an x-ray done on my finger. And I went, no, how much is that gonna cost? And they said, €1. And I went, can you put my whole body into the x-ray machine then? Just kidding, I don't need any unnecessary radiation exposure. But I don't think that people should be in fear of going to the doctor, and this is the reality for a lot of people in the United States. Currently, I pay a premium healthcare insurance in Portugal for about 85 euros a month, and that includes just about everything. Whereas...
But that's pretty expensive to most of us. And yeah, we do pay higher taxes, I think, so we have healthcare, but it's not always as like good, you know, you have the waiting hours are so long. I know it's like you shouldn't complain, but you know, it's I don't know. It also depends on the country. Again,
not so good insurance in the United States that I was paying $500 for a month was never accepted anywhere and was a complete hassle to have. So the polarization is pretty crazy in terms of the healthcare here. Now, I will say that the public hospitals tend to get overrun here in Portugal sometimes. But because I have private healthcare insurance, I can use any of the private state-of-the-art hospitals located anywhere in Portugal. And I've been there a couple times and they're super nice and I've been really impressed by the facilities. Now, alcoholism certainly exists in Europe, that's for sure. But the drinking culture in the United States is completely different than most of Europe, maybe more similar to Ireland or United Kingdom. A lot of European countries have a long history with wine and beer, and they've developed an art form on when and where and how much to drink. In comparison to the American binge culture, shots, 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 this doesn't really exist in Europe for the most part. In fact, it's very rare to see people taking shots, and if they are, they're these little baby shots that are half of what they are in the United States. I feel like in the United States, it's encouraged to get wasted and get super drunk, and people brag about these experiences. But
honestly, again, this really depends on the country. In Finland, we definitely do get drunk in Finland. There's no such word as like getting a get together or let's go out. It's let's go get drunk. Literally, there's a word in Finland that you use when you say like let's go out, and it says like the word itself is let's get drunk. Mennään kännäämään. Like that's, or I don't know, that's like in Finland the drinking culture is way different. But here in Spain, for example, yeah, there's like vineyards and you'll have your glass of wine with your food, you know, you'll have a chat, you maybe go outside, have a few drinks. Not really like in Finland or in other countries, but you know, it's Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Greece, kind of like, again, these warmer countries that have like a different culture when it comes to drinking. And then it's different again when you go to like the north, you know, and Finland, Norway, like the cold areas where you need that little something to warm you up.
But in Europe, you don't want to be that guy. Don't be that guy stumbling through.
Oh yeah, if you're in Greece, Portugal, Italy, France, Spain, we can tell if someone's a tourist right away. Well, I say we can tell because I've lived in Spain my whole life, nearly. And it very, like, it really stands out when someone's drunk.
The streets, they will think you are a complete idiot. Do yourself a favor and don't be that guy. But how I see the United States now is not all negative, and there are some things that I took for granted while growing up there. One of those things is the American dream. Now, a lot of people said that is dead, but I believe the spirit is still very alive and well. The concept of entrepreneurship is not as popular here in Europe as it is in the United States. The United States is a place where people have a dream and they can move that future forward. And I have to credit that optimism for the entrepreneur spirit that I have today. And I never realized how truly American this concept was. And I would not be where I'm at today without this hustler go-getter mentality. And I have to give massive credit to the United States for that. I think a lot of times in Europe, it is this foreign concept to have this grandiose dream where you can live in financial freedom and retire early. But I believe Americans have this spirit of working very, very, very hard to be able to retire and enjoy, a certain amount of your life. However, one of the biggest problems is that people don't end up retiring until 65 in the United States, and most of your life's over. So younger Americans now want to retire at 40 and 35 if they can, and more power to them if they can figure out how to do so. But
30?
After painting these
At 35 is crazy.
generalizations with such a wide brush, it's important to mention that there are countercultures and micro-communities all over the United States that also criticize many of the things that I mentioned in this video. There's an America that I love and miss so much. But of course, there are truths to the stereotypes or else they wouldn't exist. But at the end of the day, honestly, I'm just trying to have an open, fun conversation. And that's one of the beautiful things about living in the free world. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Am I just trying to put everybody into a box, or is there so much more nuance to all of this? Either way, I will be continuing to make videos all about Portugal. If this is something of interest to you, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. This is some guy named Dave in Portugal, and we'll see you next time.
He does seem like the nicest guy ever. I think he's like personal opinion shines through a little bit in the video, which is totally fine because it's his video. But he seems like a like an amazing person. But yeah, the thing is that the Europe is so different depending on the country that you can't really say or compare Europe with America. You should compare the country to America to have like an actual valid comparison. But yeah, a lot of the things that he said is true, at least to the area where he's at right now. And I just found it quite interesting. I don't know what to say. Guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me for this video. I really hope you liked it. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!